If you're curious to hear a little music from our guest Carla Lucero, who we spoke to in our most recent episode, check out E4TT's annual concert of music by women and non-binary composers, Midnight Serenades, on January 25th. Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists, sponsored by a grant from the California Arts Council. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we're joined by Vivian Fung, who we spoke to in March 2022. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us. You live in the San Francisco Bay Area and were born in Canada. Your family has roots to Cambodia on one side and China on the other, and you've traveled widely to Asia to research and explore your identity. What has that meant for your music?
Wow, that's a lot to pack in. I think of my music as sort of, it's become an extension of myself, more than sort of any sort of cultural, it doesn't really have a cultural attachment to it. So I think of my music as sort of a exploration to understand myself and my family. And so a lot of times my music is about identity, but it's not really tied to a specific cultural, location or have you. It is about my personal experience. It's about my personal feelings. And because of that specificity, I think it also becomes universal because it's so specific to me. And I hope that my journey is also resonates with other people. And so it's for me, it's about the human sentiment and the human condition more than it is about tracing the cultural backgrounds or being faithful to that. I guess I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, and as a byproduct, of course, I would have certain influences. Gamelan has been a huge influence because of the fact that I joined a Balinese gamelan for many years, and I have an affinity to Southeast Asia. Recently, I've begun an oral history of my family's journey, trying to they did escape the Khmer Rouge back in 1975, the year I was born. And I composed some opera scenes around that, as well as a percussion piece, and I'm hoping to enlarge that into a bigger full-length opera. So all these things sort of shape who I am and also my music. And I kind of tend to borrow from all of these things and assimilate that into my own voice.
Has that changed over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I consider myself a late bloomer, even though, on paper, it seems like, I had a pretty early sprouting, but I consider myself a late bloomer because of the fact that it took me a long time for me to figure out all these things about where I fit in, just even in the realm of concert music, all this training that I had, I got this traditional French sort of training with counterpoint and all that, all the craft that you need to traditionally become a composer. And then you ask yourself, what do you do with that? And it took me a long time to figure out my voice in the midst of all these other things that I was trained to do. And it took me a long time because I had to unlearn a lot of things that I learned. And I think also what's difficult about my upbringing and my situation is that I'm not really tied to, being born in Canada and really going through my schooling in the United States, there's a neutrality about the cultural upbringing, right? So, if you were born in China, there are certain things that you come into culturally that is very strong. But here, it can be a lot of different things. And sort of this in-betweenness of neither being here nor there it threw me off a lot. And to come to terms with that took me a long time. And I think it resonates with a lot of people that, immigrant families, not just, Chinese American, what have you, but a lot of immigrant families whose children were born here and they associate with their family, but they don't necessarily associate with the cultural background of that family, from the original place that they were born. So there's a lot of in-betweenness, and to figure that out is very tricky, in fact. And so for me personally, it took me a long time.
Thank you for listening to For Good Measure, and a special thank you to our guest, Vivian Fung, for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at www.e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible in part by a grant from the California Arts Council and generous donors like you. For Good Measure is produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to audio engineer extraordinaire Stephanie Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.